what I've done. Look what you've done. The grip was loose. It was loose. It was loose. It was loose.
It seems we're going to be talking about the humans today. Now, the humans are easily one of the most tragic creatures within the entire Adventure Time story. And I know at this point it's kind of become a running gag how basically every single creature within the Adventure Time universe is some way tragic or sad, but in this case it really is true. The humans were put into a dire situation on numerous occasions, which is why so many people believe that Finn was truly the last human. Now, there is a lot to go over in this particular subject, so with that being said, let's go ahead and get right into it. 1,000 years prior to the main story, the mushroom bomb would serve as a catalyst, but this is not where it actually begins. Before the Mushroom Bomb was the Mushroom War, a particularly bloody war in which pretty much everyone was involved. Many fans speculate that this was this world's equivalent of World War II, and considering the planes that we end up seeing within Simon's flashbacks, well specifically on the tapes, this does actually match the description of many planes during that era. Regardless on whether or not this was actually World War II or not, one thing remains clear: one side got incredibly desperate. This all culminates into the dropping of the Mushroom Bomb. Now, I have multiple videos detailing the Mushroom Bomb, and all of them are within a playlist that will be in the description. With that being said, I'll go ahead and give a brief summary here. The Mushroom Bomb was a super weapon specifically designed out of magic as well as technological advancement. It was both holding as well as powered by the very essence that would eventually become the Lich. When this bomb was dropped, all hell broke loose, and it would ultimately be the catalyst that pretty much every single thing within Adventure Time was based off of. Now, when the bomb was dropped, although it did massive amounts of damage to civilization and many humans, it wasn't actually the bomb itself, but the reincarnation of the Lich that would prove to be a major problem. When the Lich was born by the explosion, he immediately began resurrecting pretty much every single dead human within a certain radius and creating a massive army. Due to the fact that civilization had suffered a massive hit, there was pretty much no one around who was actually able to stop him nor his army. This resulted in the Lich pretty much destroying every single bit of civilization that was still on Ooh. However, humanity was not completely destroyed, as there were stragglers as well as small communities worth who were trying to get away. However, many of them would die as well. The radiation sickness that many people would ultimately face would result in many just dying from that. A good example of this would be Marceline's mom, who would eventually succumb to radiation sickness, coughing up blood, and eventually just dying within a small abandoned building. Many humans would attempt to escape into vaults in order to avoid the radiation as well as the various dangerous mutants throughout all of Ooh. However, many of these vaults would become compromised. A good example of this would be the clubhouse within the episode Obsidian. Considering when Marceline came back, they had all died seemingly doing some level of activity, it's possible they either died due to sickness, radiation sickness, or some other affliction. It's also very unlikely that this is the only vault. However, considering that we literally see no other humans within Ooh, these vaults were either abandoned, compromised, or broken into by the mutant population. Many humans who couldn't find vaults either died due to radiation sickness, starved to death, or were torn apart by the various mutant populations. But don't worry, things get much worse. On top of the oozers, the Lich's army, the mutants, the disease, the starvation, and basically everything else I've already described, the world decided that it wanted to be a jerk and have beef with humanity in particular, so one thing that ended up happening was the vampires finally made their move. You see, one thing that remains clear is that the vampires worked in secrecy because if the humans had ever considered them a problem with their government unity and technology, they could easily wipe out the vampires. However, after the Mushroom Bomb, this became a non-factor, which resulted in them hunting them down even further. They would wipe out entire communities worth of humans, and humans would either be taken in as thralls, taken in to be transformed into more vampires, or consumed altogether. Marceline even stated that their atrocities against humanity were so bad that the only fair punishment was for them to be staked over 1,000 times. Now, the vampires would eventually be defeated, but at that point, the humans were dwindled to such a low number that they were basically already extinct. But don't worry, things get much worse. You see, in an unknown event, one major explosion would cause a massive chunk of the world to be blown off, which would kill even more humans, reducing their already abysmal numbers into something even lower. At this point, the amount of humans that actually existed could probably be counted upwards in the hundreds. However, things would eventually take a turn for the better. You see, after the vampire attacks, or sometime before them, a group of humans would find the islands. Now, here's something that's rather interesting. In the show, it is never stated nor said exactly who the founders were. However, in the islands comic strip, it turns out that the group of humans that Marceline had protected from the vampires would be the ones that would discover and colonize the islands. Now, I'm not going to go in depth because I'm not entirely sure whether or not this comic is still considered canon to the story. However, if it is still canon to the story, this means that Marceline is directly responsible for saving all of humanity, and that every single single human that we see on the island, including Finn, Minerva, and Martin, descend from this one particular tribe of humans that Marceline had saved. Now, I would add more detail from the comic simply due to the fact that it answers many of the questions that the Island miniseries left unanswered. However, as I mentioned previously, it is still debated whether or not the comic is still considered canon, so we are going strictly by the show. If you guys want me to cover the comic as a whole, be sure to put it down in the comments below so I know that you're interested. Moving on, this discovery definitely was a godsend simply due to the fact that pretty much every single human was getting murdered by oozers, the lich, rainicorns, as well as pretty much everything else under the sun. And here's the thing, they actually would prosper on the islands. Their population would slowly grow and they would continuously increase their technology, eventually getting to the point where they were completely self-sustaining and incredibly advanced. Now, this took them hundreds of years and they were still incredibly close to extinction, but they definitely were doing much better than they have been for many years. They would utilize this technology in order to help humanity in pretty much any way they can, specifically creating things such as super soldiers. They were also known as the Seekers, and their entire purpose was to basically hunt down other humans for various reasons. Nanochips would be implanted into them, which when utilized could either completely take over their minds or simply upload new information, as well as flat out upgrade their own bodies on a whim. It also seems that the humans here became incredibly religious, seeing the founders, the original humans who found the island, as godlike figures, and as such would progressively increase their own doctrines in the name of the founders. Now, there seems to be a collection of jobs which every single person is eventually funneled into. A good example of this would be the helpers and the seekers, and there's bound to be other occupations that we simply don't know about. Now, the island is decked out with a buttload of technology which is specifically designed in order to help humanity. A good example of this would be the technology utilized in order to pretty much simulate the 4 seasons. Another good example of this would be the creation of the golem. Supposedly, the golem was created by Dr. Gross and is specifically designed in order to protect the island from any invaders, as well as stopping any human from getting out. A concept which is a mainstay when it comes to the islands. You are not allowed to leave the islands, and whenever you try, one of 3 things will happen. One is that if you actually manage to get to the ocean, the Guardian will personally kill you. The other is if you are captured by Seekers before you can even try to escape. And lastly, there's re-education. Now, we don't know exactly what happens during re-education, but what we do know is that it is not pleasant. They imply that it has some level of physical violence. And supposedly, after going through re-education, typically what results is that the person will give up all hope on trying to escape the island. This also bleeds into their very education system. Seekers are specifically educated to believe that they are helping every single person who tries to leave the island because everything outside of the island is bad, while normal individuals are specifically educated to believe that everything outside of the walls is bad and that you should be afraid of everything. Complacency is the name of the game, and new ideas are never appreciated. Despite the fragility of this system, it actually did work rather well for a pretty decent amount of time. Now, obviously, as things progress, there would be more free thinkers and more people who wanted to escape the island. And because of this, there was in fact a crime syndicate as well as underworld within the islands. This caused unrest as well as more violent proceedings by the Seekers. This would also result in opportunists who would actively try to utilize this particular system in order to gain more money as well as various gadgets. A good example of this would be Martin. However, although the humans were doing relatively well, this would not last. You see, one of the scientists, specifically Dr. Gross and all of her insanity, was working on biological weapons, something you just had to do when your population is already incredibly low and you literally live within a small nitpick of islands. So yeah, it went about as well as any of you could possibly have imagined. The bioweapon, which I will just continuously call the Plague, was released onto the islands, and this caused mass death across the board. Over 65% of the entire population of humans were wiped out in an incredibly short amount of time. But this had more consequences than you could possibly imagine. First off, the Seekers and soldiers were the first to go. Due to the fact that they were directly responsible for maintaining the order in every single one of these islands, this resulted in many of the outer colonies completely falling apart. Humans were now being left behind during evacuations, and people were getting killed by remaining wildlife. Some couldn't mentally handle the reality of the situation, so immediately just went to virtual reality to just not deal with the problems at hand. And pretty much every single doctor within the entire society would die out personally due to the fact that they were directly on the front lines during this pandemic. Dr. Gross would personally flee from the scene simply due to the fact that 1, she didn't want to contract the illness, but 2, she didn't want to face the music of what she had done. Regardless, her actions were directly responsible for the death of Minerva. Finn's mother would contract the disease and her body would slowly fail her. This would force her to upload her consciousness into the computers in order for her to save humanity by becoming hundreds of helpers. However, do not be mistaken, Minerva is still dead. Her consciousness that we see is simply a copy of the original, while the original body was completely destroyed and digitized. However, her sacrifice would not be in vain, as she would manage to save a couple hundred humans. Now, I could go over Minerva as well as the various other humans, however, I would like to kind of skip over this simply due to the fact that a good amount of them are getting their own videos to begin with. But one thing that is particularly important is the fact that after the humans would come back at the end of the series, 1,000 years later later down the line, they seem to have gone completely extinct or again endangered. I would like to speculate on this, but here's the thing, the amount of information that we actually know on why this became the way it is completely unknown. It's possible that they simply weren't ready for the land of Oo and their technology simply was unable to save them, but I find this somewhat unlikely. But with that being said, that's pretty much all I got for this video. I know I could have gone over all the various humans like Mo, Minerva, Martin, and all the others, but the fact of the matter is they're getting their own videos eventually. So considering that, I'm just gonna go ahead and end the video right here. If you like videos like this, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell icon, as well as comment down below if you have any ideas for a video. And as always, I will see you in the next video. Bye!